Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 134. It's the 9th of August. Dennis Krav here with Kasper Rozalowski, return show off Submission Radio. We're like the Jon Jones of the MMA community. We're back, baby, and it's great to be back. You know, undisputed champions, I suppose, in the buffet line. And, you know, Kasper, just saw Jerry Seinfeld last night in Melbourne, so I'm feeling this energy going through my body, this talking energy that I feel like will aid us well in this episode.
I'm jealous, man. I'm so jealous that you saw Jerry. I feel like we should have, to commemorate you seeing Jerry Seinfeld, we should have started the show with like you doing stand-up, and then they're like a bum, 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 a bit of like bass, the Jerry Seinfeld intro. I think everybody would have loved that.
Oh, that would have been great. And then we would have attempted the switch. We would try to get a couple of guests switched out if we would remember the episode. But no, it's a lot of fun. And a big episode of Submission Radio. We really missed speaking to you guys. We were away in Anaheim. We took a couple of weeks. Obviously, we were up there, so we missed out on the episode. Coming back, we missed out on doing the episodes. Now we're back here. It's great to be back. And we've got a fun episode of Submission Radio for you, but not without its controversies, Kasper, as one of the big names from this week unfortunately couldn't make it onto the program.
What people don't realize is getting guests for the show is incredibly hard, and on a weekly basis we are faced with challenges. One of the big names, Chris Weidman, unfortunately will not be on the program. He was supposed to be on the show. Chris actually had thumb surgery, and he's still recovering. We didn't want to bother Chris, and you know, he's obviously having his recovery period, and we don't want a groggy Chris Weidman on the program. We want him, you know, 100%, that attitude, the New York energy. We want that Chris Weidman. So we figured we'd pencil him in for another time, but we still have a bunch of sexy guests. We were able to finagle some last-minute guests, and I think we got a fun lineup. We've got Coach Wink returning on the program. He was always going to be the program. Coach Wink's been locked in since the day we left Anaheim. He's obviously going to be talking about a whole bunch of things. Jon Jones, Brock Lesnar, Cris Cyborg, Holm. There's a lot to speak to Coach Wink about. I'm super excited. Stefan Struve, a man who we've never had on the show before, so I'm really excited to have him on the program for the first time. He's obviously got his big fight coming back, returning from almost a year-long layoff. He's had a lot of challenges, and he's facing Alexander Volkov in the UFC's return show in September. So I'm excited to chat to him about a bunch of things. Also, Angelo Reyes, we were able to sneak Angelo Reyes on the program. Obviously, this whole Paulie Malignaggi situation is out of control. He did a huge interview on the MMA Hour, spoke about a whole bunch of things. We're going to get Angelo Reyes, who was with him throughout a lot of that, to get his perspective, talk about that. And that's not it. We've got more guests, don't we, Dennis?
Yeah, we've got a good friend, Damon Martin, coming on the program. He'll be talking about Paulie as well, but we'll also be talking about what's going on with Dana White. We see WME-IMG buying out investors. What's happening with Dana White's future? He'll share his thoughts. We'll share our thoughts. Also, Robert Whittaker knocking back a spot on TUF. He was offered a chance to go up against Michael Bisping, didn't do it, shared his thoughts on it. We share our thoughts, and Robert Whittaker sharing his thoughts, and if this was the right move. Also talking about this GSP versus Bisping, Tyron Woodley missing out on the fight, and a lot more. So, guys, make sure to stay tuned. And also, if you haven't liked us on Facebook, there's always a few fun things for you guys to check out. But this week, we have a chance for you guys to win an ultimate training pack of supplements from our friends over at Musashi Nutrition. That's right. Again, a big thank you to Musashi for getting us over there to UFC 214 as a way for them to give you guys one last parting gift there, giving you guys an opportunity to win this pack. Unfortunately, this is only for our listeners in Australia. Very easy to enter this competition. You jump onto our Facebook page and tag a friend in the post. Make sure you're both following Musashi on Facebook to go into the draw, and we'll be announcing the winner on the next episode of Submission Radio. Only one to give away, so jump on the Facebook page when you get a chance. Facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS. Like the page, like the Musashi page, and tag a friend in there. I mean, it's a great pack. It's got a whole bunch of awesome product in there. Don't want to miss out on that. Jump on the page and become a part of the competition now.
And I love it. I love giving things away on the show. I love doing giveaways because you guys are obviously great to us. A lot of great comments, a lot of great iTunes reviews, obviously listening to the program. So it's nice when we can give something back. And obviously a huge thank you to Musashi for providing the opportunity to be able to do that. But enough of that, enough housekeeping. We have a big show to get on the road. And Dennis, I believe our first guest is on the line and you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a friend of the show who saw one of his longtime fighters have the return of a lifetime, beating Daniel Cormier and becoming the undisputed UFC light heavyweight champion once again. one half of Jackson Winkeljohn. We have Coach Mike Winkeljohn on the line. Coach, welcome back on the show. It's great to have you back on.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. I love being on your show.
Excellent, great, because we love it as well, and it was great seeing you in Anaheim. What fans didn't see was that just before we did our interview with you outside the Honda Center, a fan came up to you and was like, "Hey, are you Daniel Cormier's coach?" And you said, "No, I am not." It was a hilarious little moment. I'm just wondering, do you get a lot of fans? We were thinking, what hilarious timing. I mean, the countdowns are everywhere. But anyway, fans get confused. Do you get a lot of fans approaching you on these fight weeks? And what's some of the stranger things and interactions you've had said to you by fans?
Well, sometimes I make the mistake, I guess, in some ways, of walking down the crowd. Not that I like the fans, like talking to them. The problem is that you try to get places to go, and it makes it hard to get going and stuff. No, you know what? Nothing really exciting other than I'm always, I guess, impressed with the enthusiasm some of the fans have for the fighters and how important it is, how their superstars are important to them, you know. And it's I don't know, it's kind of neat to see that Jon Jones or Holm can have that kind of influence on people. So, with that being said, hopefully, everybody does the right thing. Jon Jones the right thing, and shows people the right path.
And I feel like you're almost like a father figure to people in the MMA community. They've loved you for so long. They've watched you for so long. So whenever you're around, I feel like people just feel like they can come up to you, take photos, and say weird things. And it was a memorable event. Lots of great fights, UFC 214. And before we jump up the card, we just wanted to check in on Cowboy. We know he had a huge battle with Robbie Lawler. So we're just wondering, how's he doing now over a week removed since the fight's gone down?
You know what, Cowboy, two things. Immediately after the fight, I was worried about his eye more than the fight. I thought Cowboy had edged that fight, but with that being said, that's arguable. I was worried about his eye because he got poked in the eye, and I had lost my eye ways back. So my worry at that moment was I got to make sure that his vision's okay. But it's great. He's fine. He looked at the tape since, and he thinks he won the fight. He knew that he got in there with Robbie Lawler and banged with him. Cowboy's always proud of that. I wish he wasn't. And was one of the best in the world. And so he's okay with it now that he went back and watched the fight and saw how well he did in the actual fight.
We saw there was a possible fracture to his left eye as well because he got slapped with a pretty long medical suspension. Do you know, have the tests been cleared? Does he have a fracture under that eye? Is he good to come back sooner?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sure he's going to be okay, or else I probably would have hurt him. So if I had to guess, knowing Cowboy the way he is, he's going to want to fight as soon as possible. So expect Cowboy to fight soon.
And just curious, what did you think of the fight, and more specifically the decision? Because there was a lot of debate over who won that third round. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, you know what? That's the way it is. I think a lot of judges are always influenced by the forward pressure and the big swinging shots versus more accuracy on the shots, that type of thing, and movement. And so I can see sometimes the judges, I always expect the judges to go the other way, to give it to Robbie Lawler because he's coming forward. I mean, Robbie did that with Carlos Condit and got the decision. That's what Robbie does. He's great at what he does. But I really thought that Cowboy had edged that fight out and had won it.
Well, while we're speaking of the welterweight division, Tyron Woodley, he got a lot of flack for the way the fight played out with him and Demian Maia. Dana White gave the GSP fight to Bisping, and he had some negative things to say about Woodley. But from Tyron's perspective, he kind of fought a smart fight, took very little damage. And as a coach and someone who understands smart game plans, what did you think about him being so criticized over his performance by the UFC? Do you think it was warranted?
Yes, from a promoter standpoint, they like the wars. They like the fight of the night. Of course they do, because it sells and that type of thing. But for the fighter himself, for the champion, for Tyron, he's a smart individual. It's all about the W, not doing something stupid. And, at the end of the day, you get paid more usually when you get the W than when you have just a big brawl. And play it right. Get the win is the most important thing at this level. That's why, the Mayweathers of the world, might not brawl, might be so good defensively, but they make a lot of money, and they're not getting brain damage.
Absolutely. I honestly think that the UFC was a little bit harsh in that Tyron Woodley fight. I agree with you. I think he really did do what he needed to do. While we're talking about the card, Cris Cyborg obviously went in there, made history. She was able to become the new featherweight champion of the UFC. Tonya Evinger, though, she was able to stay in there and make this more of a fight than many believe. She hung in there, showed her toughness. Just curious, what did you think of Chris's performance, Coach?
There's a lot of ways to look at it. You know, Cris is, she showed that she can do some more rounds. I wasn't sure about her conditioning after a weight cut, but there's some holes in her game. There's no doubt. I think Evinger showed a lot of that. I think she exposed her in many ways. Now Tanya's kind of unorthodox with her striking, so that can make anybody look kind of weird sometimes. But with that being said, I think we definitely see a lot of weaknesses in Cris Cyborg. You know, I like Cris as a person and stuff, but there's no doubt there's some holes in there, and she's definitely beatable.
And it looks like she wants Holly next as the next opponent, and the UFC look like they're really keen on Holly fighting next as well. So we know Holly was there during the post-fight presser watching Jon Jones, but has the UFC already had a chat with you guys about her being the next contender?
Yeah, there's talks back and forth. You know, right now it's at the point where you know, Holly is fought her last fight at 135, jumping up in weight when Cyborg's cutting. Those are the issues that we have to think about and decide time-wise what's best. Holly, on a side note, never will turn down a fight. She's like, yeah, whatever you want. And she basically leaves that up to myself and her manager, Lenny Fresquez. And she'll just go out and fight. So she's okay with fighting Cyborg. There is no doubt about it. She's okay with she really wants to get a shot at Shevchenko again and or Nunes if Nunes wins the fight. But that's where Holly's mind's at right now. She just wants the big fight, and she's very capable of it.
And I'm just curious, where do you sit on this, Coach? Because we've obviously spoken many times before, and you've made it clear that you'd like to see Cris be clean for a year before Holly fights. So it looks like the UFC are targeting November 4th, the Madison Square Garden card. Have you sort of changed your stance on the fight and how soon it could happen? Do you think this would be something that might stop the fight from happening on November 4th? You'd like to sort of, I guess, have more time between you know, Holly and Cris fighting?
You know, Holly's always been bitter when she said the short notice fight, so it's not a time thing. You know, I think I would like to see Cris be clean for a long period of time, and there's no doubt she has been busted in the past. But with that being said, it's just about what's the right fight for Holly right now at this time in her career. And the Cris Cyborg fight may or may not be the right fight, so it depends on money, where it's at, and if we have enough time to put on a little bit of weight to fight at Cris Cyborg.
I mean, Cris has ruled for a really long time, but I guess her biggest criticism is that she hasn't really fought the highest caliber opponents in a lot of her fights. And this isn't Chris's fault by any means. It's just people weren't really available for her to fight. So fighting someone with Holly Holm's experience and abilities, how do you see this fight playing out?
Oh, you know, I think Holly can pick her apart. There's no doubt about it. What people don't understand is how strong Holly is, too, in the clinch. They're on her feet, moving and stuff. Cris is definitely going to try to do most of her damage, pushing her back against the cage. You know, good luck keeping Holly there and backing her up, coming in that hard. But, yeah, you know, Cris is very strong. But I think Holly wears her down and is able to stop her. You know, Holly, you look at Holly's knockout percentage. I think next to her and Amanda Nunes are the biggest out there. She stops all of her fights, everybody else other than Cyborg. So Holly's got the power to stop Cyborg, just like Cyborg has the power. The difference is Holly's got the speed and the footwork.
And she's obviously had a huge amount of accomplishments in her career. Obviously, MMA fans are most familiar with her for defeating Ronda Rousey back when people said it couldn't be done. And I feel like if she went in there and beat Cyborg, it'd be almost like history repeating itself. There goes Holly Holm again, sort of throwing a wrench in the UFC's plans. What do you think it would mean for her legacy if she did add Cyborg to her resume?
I'll be fantastic, you know, and I think it puts Holly back where she deserves to be. You know, she was I thought she beat Randame. Miesha Tate was just a game of inches, and she wasn't there for Shevchenko. But Holly deserves to be considered the best of all time, and she'll be back. Mark my words.
All right, well, let's jump over to Jon Jones because he looked great all week long and performed fantastically. Now that the fight's come and gone, though, you got to dish the dirt to us, Coach. Tell us, was the lead-up as smooth as it appeared? Or were there any issues in camp with injuries, anything niggling away at Jon, or any setbacks that you can share with us now that the fight's in the books?
Oh, yeah, I'll share with you a couple nights before the fight. Yeah, he couldn't lift his arm. he had hurt at wrestling. He wrestled a little too hard with his partner, and maybe from a lack of warm-up, I'm not sure. But it was kind of scary. It was one of those situations where when I was warming him up, I'd asked the coaches, and they had agreed, they were ahead of me on this, that we shouldn't be doing a lot of wrestling because I didn't want John to have to underhook and lift with his one arm because it could potentially cause it to, be hurt again and mess with his mindset. I wanted to keep that out of it, and hopefully, so that way, if he got re-injured in the fight, the adrenaline would take over. So it was kind of scary that nobody knew about. There was an injury behind the scenes, but John is who he is. He's as tough as they come, and like I said, nobody beats Jon Jones by himself. Once he decides he wants to win a fight, he's going to win.
That's crazy. And just to clarify, so that happened 2 days before the fight. What was Jon's reaction when that happened? I imagine you guys as coaches would have been pretty concerned at that point about going in there with a phenomenal wrestler like Daniel Cormier and Jon not being able to lift his arm.
Oh yeah, he just couldn't lift it basically over his head and stuff. It's just, of course, it's definitely concerning. You're thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking, are you going to be able to underhook with that arm, or if not, you're going to use a lot more frames and more downward pressure and circle the opposite direction. So game plan might have to be changed a little bit if it doesn't get healed. So there's a lot of things that are going through the coach's mind. Who knows what was going through Jon's mind? He basically didn't say anything other than he's fighting.
Wow. And I mean, what was the status of the arm as you guys were walking out to the octagon? Was it a little bit recovered, or was it still at a point where it was a worry for you guys?
Well, he didn't say anything about it. Let me put it that way. No matter how much it hurt, if it was tingling, if it felt weak, Jon didn't say anything. He just went and fought, and that's why Jon Jones is champion. He has that mindset.
Wow, that's crazy. And obviously Daniel Cormier showed up and really delivered on that night, really brought in the second fight. Didn't make it easy for Jon by any means. What were your thoughts in those starting couple of rounds of the fight, and what did you think of the DC that you saw in there?
Well, I tell you what, DC was hunting, and he was catching Jon with some good shots as he was able to pressure in on Jon. And I was real scared of his uppercut before the fight, and I was definitely scared of it during the fight. But then what started playing out was Jon was standing still a little bit at the end of Daniel's punches and getting caught, kind of not moving ahead of time and causing some chaos in Daniel's mind. And we got caught a few times, so I was a little scared because Daniel can hit very hard. I mean, he used to knock out heavyweights left and right. So that was kind of scary in that sense. But once Jon got back to a longer range, I say, Jon, go back to kicking range. It made Daniel start swinging for the fences and missing in the third round. And, he had been breaking the body down constantly. So, part of the plan was to do that, just hit him with a whole bunch of shots. And then all of a sudden I told Jon that this is going to be the night where you get that big boom. It's going to happen. And they had worked body shots over and over. Brandon Gibson and him had worked so many body shots that became a big part of the game plan, was just tear that body down. And then eventually you're going to find something big.
And I mean, you and Greg and the whole coaching stuff, you guys do an amazing job in the corner, especially when it kind of seems like the momentum was starting to go towards DC. I'm just curious, Coach, what's kind of the secret to dealing with a fighter in the corner when things are starting to look a little bit rough? Because we've seen a lot of coaches that haven't really been able to make the most from the situation.
You know what? It's just the biggest thing is, we're always just trying to always calm our file down, and there's different fighters. Some fighters are more emotional than others, but most of our fighters respond to just basic, simple logic in that, okay, calm down, relax. Okay, he got you this. That won't happen anymore if you change this, that, or the other thing. And if you start doing, plan B. And, people usually respond. And I guess we're very, very lucky that, fighters listen to us. And it's worked in the past. So if the fighters believe, almost sometimes, I can't say if it's the wrong advice, but the fighters believe, then that's what matters, because then they'll go perform.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously that head kick, that was the thing of beauty. When did you know that this fight was over? Was it once Jon hit it, or did you think DC may sort of recover and come back? What was going through your mind during those moments?
As soon as he hit it, and I saw DC's legs wobble, he was basically out on his feet. He was having a hard time standing up. Jon missed him with a few of the shots, kind of swept his leg, which is a neat little trip that Jon does a lot. But other than that, it was DC just stumbling, trying to stay up. I think his mind was not there, but he was trying to get his legs underneath him, and he didn't know where he was at. I think he was eventually just going to fall down no matter what. Jon just had to hit him when he was on the ground. So I felt as soon as he hit that kick, I knew it was pretty much the end of the night.
And it was a beautiful kick. Was that something you guys were just drilling continuously going into this fight, or was it something that just sort of came out of nowhere for you?
Oh yeah, no, we drilled it. We knew Daniel had a tendency. I mean, everybody knows he has a tendency to lean that way and dip that way quite a bit. Anthony Johnson caught him with it. It's hard to change those habits you've been doing all your life. Plus, it's just natural for an orthodox fighter to pull that direction defensively, just depending on his hand positioning. So we knew that something coming up that direction had a good potential of knocking him out.
And you've obviously been with Jon through some tough times, and then you got him ready for UFC 200, and him never getting a chance to fight at UFC 200. Obviously, been around him at times when fighting seemed like we didn't even know if it was going to happen again. How did it feel when you saw that he did it? He won the fight, and he became once again the undisputed champion, of the UFC.
Oh, it was great. It was a great feeling. It was great for him because I know Jon I shouldn't say needed that, but I was excited for Jon Jones to redeem himself and get back to where he was before. And like I said, no one beats Jon Jones but himself. So now it's all back in Jon's corner again. He is the guy. He's considered the best, and so now he just has to do the right things and train hard. And I think you haven't seen a lot of what Jon Jones can do. He's capable of so much. I knew he was capable of the one-punch knockouts all day long, but what Jon can do is he can do it all. His submissions are at a whole different level. His wrestling, as you know, that's what he started with. He's great at what he does, and so he's just really hard to fight because he's so good everywhere.
Well, I mean, the big fight everyone is now focused on is Brock Lesnar. You didn't really want to go into it too much prior to UFC 214, but now that this DC fight is done, tell us, what are your feelings on this fight?
Oh, I love the fight. I actually personally, I really do like Brock Lesnar. He's got some great character. He has been real cordial to me in the past. That was definitely not needed. So I like that guy. I've always actually wanted to train him.
When did you guys interact? I'm just curious. When did you guys sort of have any interactions and speak?
Brock Lesnar is this guy that's supposed to be this mean WWE star, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And he didn't know who I was. I don't know how many years ago it was when he basically was even thinking about getting the UFC, and he hasn't even gotten the UFC yet. And he was at a casino. I don't know if he watched some fights. I had Michelle Waterson fight outside of Phoenix. And I'm walking around the hotel at 2:30 in the morning, and my car didn't show up to take me to the airport. And he goes, "Hey, coach," which surprised me because I didn't know he even knew I was a coach.
Wow.
And he goes, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't have a ride to the airport. I got to figure this crap out." This is before Uber,
Yeah.
And he goes, "Hold on." He said, "Hold on." He went and got his bags. He got his driver, and he drove me to the airport. He went to the airport early. He didn't know me, and that's my own story.
Wow.
I mean, who does that? Who does that? Here's this guy that's supposed to be, some people don't like for whatever reason. To me, is just, I don't know how to describe it other than I was very taken back and very appreciative, and I've never really spoken to him since, but I like the guy. But with that being said, it's a sport, and he's a big guy that can run a hard double, and he's a big train, and you do not want to be in those train tracks when he's coming at you. But I think it'd be a great fight for the fans. I think it's a big money fight, and I think it can bring a lot of excitement to the sport.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was a fight that a lot of fans were really excited about when they first heard about it. We saw that Jon said that he asked his coaches their thoughts on the fight. So I'm just wondering, was it a clean sweep, and all of you, Greg, Izzy, Brandon, all agreed that Brock was kind of the fun and the right choice next? Or did anybody sort of prefer Stipe or somebody else at 205 as the next option for him?
Oh, no, I think it's the perfect fight for many reasons. I think it's a marketable fight. It's a money fight, and it's at this place where it shows the two different styles. So now you have somebody that's smaller, assume he's quicker against the bigger fighter, so that's coming forward. So it's a very sellable fight. It's kind of an exciting fight to see who can impose their will. And, we think Jon can win that fight. So we're real excited to have him do that.
And we'll let you go in a moment, Coach, because we appreciate your time. I wanted to get your perspective on this, though, because Jon obviously made the point about how much of a bigger draw Brock Lesnar is compared to Stipe, and that's kind of the driving force between choosing Brock over Stipe. A lot of fans, a lot of people have sort of theorized that Jon's picking the easier fight in Brock over Stipe, which kind of is nonsensical, seeing as Jon really has zero obligation to move up in the first place. But from your standpoint, can you sort of clarify that? And also, in your mind, who do you think is the tougher fight, Brock or Stipe?
Well, a different type of fighters. Stipe can knock out a horse when he hits him. I'm not saying Brock couldn't. He's just slower when he does it. And Brock's you got to get out of the way of Brock when he's driving forward. So definitely different fights, but what you said earlier is the key. Jon is a light heavyweight. So you can't ask somebody just to step up and fight the best in the world at that heavyweight and forego the money fight against someone that they can beat. Jon said it himself. He thinks a good big man always beats a good smaller man. Jon Jones said that in his press conference. And do I think Jon thinks he can beat Stipe? Yeah. Do I think he might have said it? Yes. But I like the Brock Lesnar fight for right now, and we need to work on some skills and get some weight on Jon before he fights with Stipe, because I think Stipe is a harder fight.
Mm-hmm. And you told us in Anaheim that you believe Jon is sort of the better wrestler. And we saw how Jon was able to handle DC's wrestling as well, which was really, really impressive. Do you think he can stuff all of Brock's takedowns, or do you think because of Brock's size advantage, Jon at some point would be fighting off his back?
He could, but people would be surprised. You haven't seen Jon on his back, what Jon can do. He's got some great scoops in there, but also getting Jon to his back is very hard. His hips are up first all the time. He's very good in the scramble. And Jon's hard to take down. It's, like I said, it's Brock's going to shoot on him, but it doesn't mean Jon's going to be right in front of him. So, expect Jon to, like I said, get off the tracks. And I see Brock coming so hard that he's going to be, it's good. It's going to be one of those things where I like to see Jon get out of the way and Brock basically runs to the cage. In essence, that kind of theory, get out of the way. So stuffing the shot is different than not letting the shot happen and doing things to your strikes that makes him not want to shoot, scare him, kind of like Alice Overeem did. So there's a lot of different ways for the fight to play out.
Do you think Jon has the capabilities to finish a big guy like Lesnar? We saw his finishing power in this DC fight. Do you think he has the skills and would be able to overcome the size advantage and actually finish Lesnar?
Oh, I sure do. I think Jon can knock out anybody with his strikes. The problem in the past is Jon, striking was not his base. Wrestling was his base. So all those years when he came over to us, it was just kind of working with Jon. He was just doing a lot of repetition, a lot of different unpredictable type of shots. But it was always, a lot of reps, a lot of I want to say just bop, 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 that type of thing. But as you saw with this fight with Daniel, it was time. We had that conversation that it's time to go hard, and he started letting some things go hard, and that's kind of a first for Jon Jones. Letting those 100%ers go, and he believes. And once he believes in something, like I said about Jon Jones, he always makes it work.
And we know the feelings that you have about Cris Cyborg in regards to a history of failed drug tests. Is there a concern at all about Brock and his controversial PED past, considering especially how recent everything is with what happened with him and Mark Hunt?
Well, you know what you got in front of you, like I said. So you got this guy who's just gigantic and stuff. I'm coming at Jon, so it is what it is. No, it's not really concerned with him. I think guys that have done peds in the past is different than girls that have done them in the past, because they do get bigger, but you kind of expect that with a guy. The girls that do it, I'm always worried about, okay, they're clean, but what about their past bone? What did it change bone structure? Did it change density on different things? That's where things change a little bit. So I think it has more of an effect for girls than it does for guys. Not that it's not cheating for guys as well.
That's actually a really interesting perspective. I'm glad you said that. Coach, we'll let you go in a moment. Just want to confirm. So Brock Lesnar, that is who you are going after at the moment for Jon Jones. That's the fight that tickles the fancy the most.
Yeah, but like I said, I don't. I would love to see that fight happen, but I would put money on Jon fighting weight a lot sooner than that one fight between it, just because of the fact that I don't think Brock can fight for a while. But if that was possible, I would love for that to be the next fight.
Because obviously, like you mentioned, this fight wouldn't go down to 2018. And, we've spoken to some people, and a lot of people believe the UFC would want to keep Jon on the shelf until that Lesnar fight happens. and possibly in the meantime, maybe even see if Volkan can fight Gustafsson to see who Jon Jones would fight next. Would you be a fan of Jon sort of staying away from the sport now that he's made his comeback and waiting for that Lesnar fight and letting these Volkan and Gustafsson duke it out instead to see who fights him after this Lesnar fight? Or would you like to see him back there sooner or later because he's been away from the cage for quite some time?
I'd like to see him back in there, honestly. I think Jon is, now that he was training off season, when Jon's motivated, to get in there a fight, he keeps progressing. He keeps getting better at what he does. So instead of taking a lot of time off, I would love to see Jon back in right away. And in some ways, I think he needs it.
All right, well, there you go, Coach. We believe we've taken up too much of your time, or enough of your time. We could chat to you all day and absorb your insight, but we really appreciate the time you've given us. Of course, make sure to follow at Coach Wink on Twitter, at MMA Coach Wink, and visit jacksonwink.com. You can register for some awesome fan experiences, obviously training with Coach Wink, Greg Jackson, the entire team, stay in the dorms with other pro fighters. We've obviously got a bunch of Aussies there at the moment. We've got Tyson Pedro there, and it's pretty surreal experience in general, so make sure to go check it out. And as always, we love having you on the program, Mike. Really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for stopping by and chatting with us.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is coming back from a long layoff to take on Alexander Volkov in the main event of his home country, UFC Fight Night Rotterdam. He's won Submission of the Night 3 times, Knockout of the Night once, as well as Performance of the Night and Fight of the Night bonuses as well. We are very excited to speak to him. He is the skyscraper himself, Stefan Struve. Welcome to the program. How are you today, man?
I'm good, man. Just came back from a long day of training and then getting my body worked on by a therapist, and actually just put my legs in ice water. So just chilling right now.
I mean, the big question, Stefan, is obviously you split your time between Amsterdam and South Florida. So where are you joining us from at the moment? And are you looking to finish your training camp in the Netherlands in order to be sort of closer to the fight takes place as it gets closer to fight time?
Right now I'm in South Florida. My whole camp has been in South Florida. I came here at the beginning of June. The end of July, I flew to Holland for a week of media. And then I finished here with 5 weeks of training. I pretty much do all my camp in South Florida because I got all the, everything I need here. Training partners, trainers. The climate's great to train. I love Holland too, but training is much better here for me. So I'm flying home August 25th to fight, the week after. So
very nice, very nice. And I read I heard somewhere that you're a bit more motivated in South Florida compared to training in Netherlands. Is that correct?
The thing is, in Holland, I got family, friends. I have friends here too, but over here in South Florida, I can fully focus on what I have to do while I'm here, so I don't have to worry about anything else, and that's great. So it's very easy for me to hit 2 sessions a day, and in Holland, I just do 1 a day, and it's very hard for me to be as focused there as I am over here.
Well, before we talk about your upcoming fight, which everyone's really excited about, we got to say nobody had a bigger night on Twitter than you did after UFC 214. I mean, Jon Jones called out Brock Lesnar, and you made your feelings known about Lesnar's USADA past, and then your timeline exploded. Were you surprised by the reactions to your tweets?
No. If you talk about something like that, especially like Lesnar, his fans come from everywhere. So, I speak my mind. There's no secrets with me. I say what I believe. I think cheaters should not be in the UFC, and I think UFC made a big mistake last time by bringing Lesnar in and giving him a 4-month exemption before his fight, so that USADA wouldn't test him for 4 months, which is a normal thing to do if you bring back a fighter. I believe that if he would come back now, he would have to go through 6 months of testing. So I'd be very curious how those 6 months go.
Yeah, and one of the biggest takeaways that we found, from reading your timeline and seeing the tweets, is that a lot of fans, they just don't seem to really get it, but they also don't seem to really care, because I guess it doesn't affect them directly, unlike, say, a guy like yourself who's actually in there competing. I'm curious, yeah. Stefan, what do you think is sort of the biggest disconnect and the misconception that a lot of fans may have about PEDs in the heavyweight division, how they've historically affected fighters' careers, especially the trajectories if say, somebody loses to a guy who's on PEDs?
Yeah, no, the thing is, they see it from a different perspective. They haven't fought guys who I know. You know, I fought a bunch of guys who I know of that were not clean. Simple as that. They see it from their perspective. They don't have to deal with all those things. You know, they don't have to deal with a training camp full of hurts and like just going for broke every single day. You know, they just want to see action and performance. And I understand their point of view a little bit too, but my opinion is that when someone takes, you know, PEDs, things you shouldn't use to enhance your performance, you take away honor from your opponent, you take away money from your opponent, and you take away, you could take away his health. That's the biggest thing. Simple as that. You know, you could hurt someone more when you go into that cage being on pads. Simple as that. And that's why it should be outlawed. I think things should be different. Punishment should be way harder than it is right now. And I think Mark Hunt was very right to claim that he wanted Lesnar's purse. I think if you fight someone, you cheat. You fight someone, you go in a fight while on PEDs, you know that you're cheating. You go into that fight with the risk of hurting him more and taking away his money. I think your entire purse should go to the other person if they catch you. Simple as that.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that because that whole thing was just the USADA disaster that everyone's still feeling today. So I guess the big question out there is what kind of message do you think it sends if Brock Lesnar returns right back into a massive super fight and a huge payday against Jon Jones after that whole fiasco?
They cannot do that. It's impossible. That'd be the worst message the UFC could ever send out. So if he fights again, he should go through 6 months of testing, I believe, before he fights again. I think that's the rule right now. So if he comes back and let him go through those 6 months of testing, then, you know, I'm curious to see how he steps in the cage.
And just before we get off the topic, Stefan, I'm just curious to hear your insight. If the fight were to happen and Lesnar was hypothetically, you know, going in there on PEDs while Jones was clean, how much do you think it would affect the outcome of the fight? How much of an advantage do you think you would give him against a guy who is arguably vastly technically superior in Jon Jones?
You know, I think Jones beats him anyway. Simple as that. Jones is too good of an athlete. I don't think Lesnar gets a hold of him to take him down. Jones moves too well. I think he, I don't know, like, DC is a great fighter. And, of course, that kick was great. But before that, I didn't see the Jon Jones who we used to see as dominant as he used to be. So I'm curious to see if he refines himself and gets to be more dominant again. But I don't think Lesnar takes him down or anything, and he's definitely not going to win the fight on the feet. So,
you mentioned how you've had moments in the past in your career where you've been fighting guys and you had that feeling that they were on PEDs. Is this the most optimistic you've ever felt in the division with the USADA cleaning it up, a lot of fighters popping, and it seemingly being the cleanest it's ever been?
Yeah, no, I'm real happy with USADA. I think it was a great decision to start that. I think Jeff Nowitzki and his team do a great job so far, and they're fine-tuning it. I think they really learned from that. Hopefully, that situation with Lesnar with the 4-month exemption. But you know, I've been in touch with Nowitzki a bunch of times. Spoke about several things with him, and I like the answers he gave me. So I think it's heading in the right direction. Yeah, and I feel really good in my division right now. I see things have changed. A lot of people outside the fighters see things have changed, and not only in my division, but in every division, you know, and I think the true athletes will perform much better right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And now let's move on and talk a little bit more about you, Stefan. Obviously, the big story with you recently has been the series of unfortunate events that have kept you away from the octagon for almost a year. The fans have been needing their dose of Stefan Struve. But what has that time been like for you, and what have you been up to for the past year?
Well, I had my fight in Manchester, October last year.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that was a pretty easy win, so no real damage. Besides the shoulder that I probably worsened in that fight, it was already bothering me a little bit. But then I think a week after, UFC got in touch with me to fight Junior Dos Santos, and they mentioned a couple dates, but I first wanted to look at my shoulder. And in Holland, at first they couldn't really find what was wrong with it, and they thought it was just a bad bursitis. So in the end, we lined the fight up for February, and I went back to the States to train, and it just got worse and worse with the shoulder. At the end, I couldn't really keep my arm up anymore, and if you can't keep your arm up, you don't want to fight one of the best boxers in the world. So decided to go along with the surgery, which happened in January 13th, I believe. Spent a week and a half in the U.S. To do the first part of rehab, and then went back to Holland. Had about 4 or 5 months of rehab, and then beginning of June, I came back to South Florida to train. So, and it was good to spend some more time with my family in Holland, because I've been here a lot in South Florida the last couple of years. It was good to have a little bit of a break and, really get that hunger back too, because I always train hard, and I put a lot of energy in coming back and really building something here in South Florida. So, it was good to lay low for a little bit, although, I was working really hard to get that shoulder strong again. So.
And that must have been a really tough decision for you to make withdrawing from the JDS fight, because obviously you've got the shoulder issue. You spoke about how you can't keep your arm up, but at the same time, it would have been a rematch that really would have put you into direct title contention if you would have won it. How difficult was it for you to make that move and pull out of that fight and make that decision?
Yeah, super hard decision, and it took me a good couple days to really decide what I was gonna do. I talked about it with the people that are closest to me, what we should do with it. I tried everything, cortisone and other things, but nothing was really helping. So in the end, we made the decision, and I was happy. Once I made the decision, I was happy I did it. But I really wanted to fight bad, especially if you see Dos Santos go on and get a rematch with Stipe, it was a tough call, but I'm happy we made it, and this was like my first surgery on a joint I've ever had. So I hope to keep it that, and feeling much better, so.
That's good. That's good. Before we move on to the fight, I'm just curious, was it also tough from a financial situation? Because we know surgeries obviously aren't cheap, and when you're away for a year and you're, fighting is what you do, that's how you make a living. Was that tough? Did you have to look for any other kind of work to support yourself, or were you sort of in a comfortable position?
It's kind of crazy that you have to ask that question to a professional athlete, right?
Right, yeah.
So, no, but, I'm pretty good with my money, and I had some good wins the year before. So I'm not a big spender. I don't spend my money on stupid shit. But of course you take that in account too when you make that decision if the fight's gonna go through or not. But in the end I was okay, and it is what it is. I took a little bit of a hit there, but I'm pretty good with my money. So.
You're investing in your future. Let's talk about this next big fight coming up against Alexander Volkov. A lot of people are excited about it, but they didn't really know much about Alexander before you took this fight. So tell us, what did you think of Alex as an opponent, and did you know a whole lot about him before this fight was announced?
Yeah, no, I've seen him fight. I followed his career in Bellator. He's about the same age. He's a little younger than me. I think this is the first time I'm going to fight someone in the UFC who's actually younger than me. So it's going to be something special. But I follow his career. I think he's a good fighter. He's really getting to the point where he's in his prime, just kind of like me. He was very young when he started, had some losses, learned from it, got better and better. And he's an impressive fighter. He's a good, well-rounded fighter, but I think I am better wherever the fight takes place. That's really my opinion if I break it down. And most people I talk to who break it down for me kind of say the same things I want to hear. So it's, I feel good about it. But he's a good opponent for sure. He's a former champion of 2 other big organizations. And it's just going to be an interesting matchup. I fought tall guys before, and his style, I think, really plays into my style very well for me. He's a technical kickboxer, and I think if you try and play technical with me on the feet, then it's going to be a bad night for you.
I've heard you speak about how he's got a long reach that gives him advantage in a lot of his fights, but in this case, you've got the even bigger reach, so that's obviously going to play to your favor. And let's not forget, here you are making the big comeback, headlining in your home country of the Netherlands. I mean, you've been on Dutch UFC cards before, but never in the main event. What's that like for you? Any extra pressure?
No, I just love the opportunity. You know, I love that my friends and family and all the fans in Holland get to see another fight of mine live. It doesn't add any pressure, to be honest with you. You know, you always have to win. Simple as that. And I know that when I go into that cage, I very, very rarely disappoint. You know, the only fight I ever disappointed, in my opinion, was the fight in Australia against Jared Rosholt. But I think people understand now that I was really finding my way back after a long layoff with some serious issues. And I really learned, you know, especially from all those things happening, that this sport is 90% mental. And I already knew that before, but I learned more about it. You know, you can be the best fighter in the gym. You can have all the tools, be the best wrestler, the best grappler, the best kickboxer. I don't care. You know, I know what I bring in that cage. My mindset, I can break anybody. I don't care how good you are. You know what I mean? And that mindset was what I was trying to refine after that long layoff. And I got that back now. So I don't disappoint. So when I headline a card, I know the fans won't be disappointed if they buy a ticket, because they come to see a finish, they order a finish, and a finish is what's going to be served. So simple as that.
And just curious, Stefan, how did you find that mindset? Because I feel like it's a really tricky thing to sort of find that balance. We speak to fighters all the time who say that sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't. I guess it's just a little bit spontaneous sometimes. How did you go about finding that mindset? What was the sort of secret that you realized, all right, this is the now you're going to see the real Stefan Struve?
Well, it's what you say. Now and then it's also about the day itself. How do you feel when you wake up? Like certain things can happen. Are you worried about some things that happen on the day of the fight? But for me, it was really just refining, what I always had before I, found out about the heart issue and all the stuff happening to me. And it was just hard to get back after, getting knocked out against, I don't want to call it knocked out, getting knocked down by Mark Hunt, and, my jaw was broken. But I was very, very capable of continuing the fight. But my heart was about to explode and my jaw was a mess. So it was probably better not to carry on. And then you have a long layoff, a very serious medical issue comes, to the light. You're finally going to fight again after a year and a half, and then you pass out in the locker room and you think you're the biggest pussy in the world because of what happened. But then, it turns out I was on, medication that was like messing with my head and all that. It was just hard to really refine that focus I have when I go into the cage and do best, because there were so many things, impacting me. So I really had to bite through, and get back to the gym. And I decided to switch to South Florida to train, to really get out of my comfort zone, refine myself in the gym. Because at first I was just doing my thing, but I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't like trying to finish guys, and I still always try to not hurt my sparring partners, but I do try to, recreate the fight a little bit. And, it took a while. It took a while to refine that, but I really refound that by, just finding myself in the gym. And then, of course, you need to be a little lucky getting in the cage and just get a couple finish wins again to get that feeling back. And, that's everything that happened, what I just mentioned. And I feel great now, so I can't wait for September 2nd and to have this training camp over, because it's been a long one, it's been a hard one. My legs hurt. I want to go in that cage and take care of business. Simple as that.
And I mean, with this new aggressive mindset, how do you see this fight playing out in your mind? Is there a likely scenario that you see it ending?
It's going to be a finish no matter what. This is not going to be a 5-rounder. I got better things to do that day than fight for 5 rounds. Simple as that.
I'm just curious. What are the plans? You sound like you've already got some plans after the fight. Now, what better things do you have to do?
I don't know. I don't care, but I don't want to be in that cage for 25 minutes. Fuck that. Hell no. No. Like, my fights usually don't take longer than 1 or 2 rounds. As simple as that. So, no, he's a good opponent. It's going to be a little bit of a chess match when we start. I'm going to figure out his rhythm and figure out his reach. I see him being a little lazy now and then. He gets away with certain things because he's tall, especially in the Roy Nelson fight, and in the Timothy Johnson fight, he paid for it. And the fights he had before that in M1, the guys weren't good enough to make him pay for it. more than he did in those fights. And then his last 2 fights in Bellator, he did pay for it. And if I put those, if I take those 6 fighters and put them next to me, and I look at their skill sets, then I'm better than all of those fighters. And I'll be able to take more advantage of the holes he leaves open, wherever that is, in the stand-up, against the fence, in the clinch or on the ground. I got finishes wherever the fight takes place. So I feel that I'm going to walk him down. I'm going to catch him with something. I'm going to knock him down or take him down and then finish him on the ground. Or maybe he hits the deck and it's already over. We'll see. You never know what kind of finish comes when I go in that cage, because I'm a pretty well-rounded fighter. So we'll see where the finish is going to be.
Yeah, and you mentioned how you don't want to obviously be there for 25 minutes. You expect the fight to end a little bit earlier. And I think, like, when people think of Stefan Struve, they think of some of the crazy wars and back and forths that you've had, the exciting fights. It's crazy that you spoke about how you had that period in your life where you looked at yourself as, a pussy, and you had to sort of find yourself again, because you've obviously in the UFC shown tremendous heart. But I feel like as you sort of mature, as you get older, you've been a little bit more calculated in your last few fights. You're not going in there for these crazy wars. You're going in there, you're being more efficient with your skill set. Is that something that you're sort of actively trying to do? And is it hard for a guy like you? Like, do you when you go in there and you have these wars, do you love that? Do you have this sense of feeling alive? And do you have to actively try and stay away from these wars? Or is that just something that kind of happened in the heat of the moment and you were never really looking for those wars?
You aren't really looking for those wars, to be honest with you. Nobody really wants to have a huge cut on their forehead or their lip hanging off, I would like to go in that cage and walk out of it without a scratch on my face. But I was very young when I came into the UFC, and pretty much every single guy I faced was stronger than me physically. I had a lot of, filling out to do with my huge frame, and I had a lot to learn also. I had to stay away from certain situations, and now and then I really had to fight my heart out to fight guys that, put me in situations and thought they were going to beat my ass and thought they had me dead. But then I came back from that, and then I killed them.
Yeah.
But, you learn from that. And I tried to, of course, not put myself in situations anymore where they can take advantage of and then put me in a situation which is really bad for me. So, I got on a lot smarter. I finally found, in my opinion, that I'm using my reach way and way more, just to keep them away from me. It's pretty simple if you fight like that. So, I think I'm a lot more calculative with my fighting right now, a lot smarter, and I think that's going to pay off, especially since the heavyweight division's getting older, and I'm nearing my prime. So, yep.
And I mean, obviously, you're one of the only 2 men to have beaten the champ Stipe Miocic. So even though you're currently ranked 9th in the division, how much of motivation is it for you to get that rematch with him this time, potentially for the belt?
Huge motivation, of course. That's one of the things that I was looking at when I was out with the heart issue for so long. He was my last fight before the Hunt fight. So, and the Hunt fight for me really was like the example of what happened when, the heart condition was at its worst, because I absolutely gassed. And normally when I end a round, I walk back to my corner, I take 2 deep breaths, and I'm recovered. But the Hunt fight, my trainer had to pick me up after the first round. And my heart rate was over 200 beats a minute,
Whoa.
So it was crazy. It was scary. And, it was good to follow Stipe in that time, though, because, I just beat him, and I saw him go on and beat everybody they put in front of him pretty much. So it kept me believing in myself, too. So it was good to see him do that, and I believe I can do the same thing.
When you sort of look at your styles, I read somewhere that you still feel like you're kind of his kryptonite. Do you still see the ways that you can capitalize, and I guess some of the things that you capitalized on in your fight originally with Stipe, do you feel like you can still capitalize on them now?
He's grown a lot as a fighter, simple as that, but he's still the same person. So, I believe that if we go in that cage again, I can beat anybody in the world, including him. Simple as that. With my skill set and with my mindset, I believe I can break anybody in the world, and that includes him. Simple as that. So, if I feel the way I feel now, then I can beat anybody in the world.
All right. Well, as we let you go, for all the fans traveling down to Rotterdam to watch your fight, what's something they have to check out while they're in the Netherlands? Give us a couple of highlights for them to check out, apart from obviously your performance and fight.
Well, I think everybody knows the do's and don'ts in Holland, right? What are you guys laughing about?
Well,
we knew you were going to bring up the weed brownies at some point in this interview.
There's the red light district. I hear that's a popular place to check out, Stefan. There's the coffee houses as well. I don't know if you're a guy that likes the coffee houses a bit.
I've never smoked in my life, to be honest with you. I've been using CBD oil, which is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Does good things. I used it when I had my shoulder operated on, and you can choose then if you want to take chemicals that will, do all sorts of things with your head and mess you up and make you a zombie, or you can choose to use something a plant gives you and feel good and just be happy. That you're not on those pills I just mentioned. So, no, but what you said, there's a lot of things to do, and even if you don't smoke, it's fun to see. All those things that Amsterdam and Netherlands are known for. The buildings in Amsterdam are beautiful too, and Rotterdam's got a bunch of those buildings too on the canals. There is all sorts of things to do outside of Amsterdam and Rotterdam too, if you want to go to the countryside and really see the old-fashioned Dutch way of living. But yeah, man, there's always stuff to do. You just gotta look outside of the things that everybody knows about the Netherlands. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go, guys. If you travel in the Netherlands, specifically Rotterdam, on September 2nd, you're going to have a whole lot of fun time. Of course, Stefan Struve takes on Alexander Volkov in the main event of UFC Fight Night 116, UFC Rotterdam. That's going to be the 3rd of September in Australia due to the time difference. And, of course, don't forget to follow the man on Twitter at Stefan Struve and Instagram at Stefan_Struve. Stefan, we hope the leg feels better. We know it's in a bucket of ice right now. It sounds like there'll be no dancing tonight or maybe for the next couple of days. But good luck in the rest of training camp and good luck in the fight. And it was a pleasure chatting to you. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you guys having me on, man. Have a great day.
There he is, guys. Stefan Struve, a lot of fun. Excited to see him come back and fight over there in the Netherlands. It's going to be an interesting fight. See if he can make it back up to the title shot. He's been in the game for a while, so interested if it comes around and he gets back up there. But Cass, we've got Angelo Reyes coming up in just a few minutes to kill. So what better way to do it than talk a little bit about some of the fun things, some of the things from behind the scenes from a UFC 214 Anaheim trip that we've just come back from. I mean, it was a lot of fun. A lot of interesting things happened. I think one of the funniest things that stands out to me now that I look back on it, and I'm still dealing with it now, is the gradual sickness that took over the Submission Radio team as the fight week went on.
This is probably one of the most brutal trips we've had in all our trips. I think you kind of look forward to it. You're like, we're going to be in Anaheim, we're going to be in LA, there's Disneyland, there's UFC 214. It's going to be a great trip. I was really looking forward to it, and then it all kind of, I wouldn't say fell apart, but like when I got off the plane, I didn't sleep much. It was like a 14-hour flight. Everything was theoretically should have been great. We got upgraded to premium economy and all that kind of stuff. But man, I felt so shit coming off that flight. And then we had a bit of a marathon day. We had the press conference. Not a marathon. We had the press conference. We did some really fun interviews with Ricardo Lamas and Jason Knight. But man, I was so weathered by the end. And the next day was our biggest day. You had media day. You had the open workouts, endless scrums. You had all this extra stuff. Holy shit, I woke up a dead man. I had some kind of like ridiculous gypsy flu. It completely knocked me out. I was dying before media day, which is like crazy because it's a lot of pressure. It's arguably the most important work that you put the most pressure on of the whole trip. And I was just dead, man. I was sweating like crazy. I had to go to the chemist. I'd get all sorts of meds. I remember at one point I walked out of a food shop and nearly passed out. Then we had to do all our one-on-one interviews. So yeah, and then you tagged in. I think right on fight night, the day of the fights, you caught the gypsy flu, and then you were almost down for the count, weren't you?
Oh, for sure. It was the worst timing. Imagine this, guys. You're there, your fight night. You've got a lot of work to do. It's a huge day because you're there all day and late into the night. And I just felt it slowly take over me over and over and over as that fight day went on. And by the end, I just felt like I don't even know where I was. I was exactly like Casper. Felt like I was going to pass out. And that's when we were doing a lot of the work that you guys saw on the channel, like our little exclusive there with Tito Ortiz, where we did it sort of in the hallway. I had to run after him, quickly do that. And a lot of the other stuff that we were doing, we did the Mahogany Lounge, the Submission Radio Mahogany Lounge. So I was just trying to save my energy to do that. And it was absolutely an experience that you'd never want to repeat again, but at the same time, something I look back on and laugh at the moment. I'm still dealing with the effects of that gypsy flu right now. I've still got the cough, still got the blocked nose, still trying to get on top of it all.
And I was going to quickly... I was going to say, and that's actually why we didn't do a preview show. We're going to do a massive preview show. We're going to find like a bar or a lounge or somewhere cool and have a bunch of journalists. Dennis and me we were on the ropes, man. We're absolutely dying, and we couldn't muster the strength to do a preview show. We had to go back to our hotel room and just die. And also, you mentioned Tito Ortiz. I wanted to pan down and show this in the video, but we weren't able to. I wanted to ask him about it. We were running low on time. Tito Ortiz was wearing some very spiky shoes. He was wearing a suit, and he wore spiky shoes, and I feel like I had to mention that. They were spiky and they were shiny. They were covered in spikes.
Oh, for sure. They were a hell of a pair of shoes. And just quickly on the side note, you mentioned Jason. When we went up there, he actually went out and bought a TV for his room to play his Nintendo Switch. And the plan was they carted it into the hotel room, snuck it up to the room, and the plan was to return it after his fight and get the money back. When we were doing the interview, the room was packed full of characters, great guys, of course. And a guy was vaping on the bed right next to us as we were trying to do the interview as well. Great guy. Fantastic team. We had a lot of good times with them, and also Ricardo Lamas' team. And it's definitely some of the highlights. But you mentioned the Media Day, Casper. There's definitely an interview that stands out for a lot of the listeners who checked out the channel. That's, of course, our chat with Robbie Lawler. A chat that we really, really looked forward to. And going into this, we spoke to a lot of media members who said that Robbie Lawler was basically one of the hardest interviews to do, which surprised us because he's a quiet guy, but we were really looking forward to it. We got a few tips. A few colleagues gave us a few tips. Try talking about something different except for fighting to kick it all off. That way you'll actually get some good answers about fighting. Of course, the interview happened, and you guys would have seen what happened with the whole Disneyland California Adventure thing that didn't quite pan out as we would have liked. And the interview, played out in an interesting fashion. A lot of interesting comments underneath there in the YouTube. And it's just one of those things as well. It's kind of like you live and you die by the sword. If we didn't go out there, didn't try and mess around a bit, try to get a straight interview, well, we spoke to a lot of media members who had a really tough time doing that as well.
Nobody got anything that day. No one got anything.
So we tried to do something different for you guys, took the risk, it didn't work out. But for everybody worried out there, don't worry. We went to both Disneyland and California Adventure on the same day. We couldn't decide because Robbie Lawler wouldn't give us a straight answer, so we got a double pass. We can jump between the parks. So just wanted to make sure everybody was relaxed and didn't worry about any of those issues there as well, Cass. There's a couple other highlights as well outside the world of MMA that you and me had personally. We were able to go up to the world famous Comedy Store and meet a couple of, I suppose, comedy heroes, people that we like. One of them was a guy from a new show on Netflix called Glow, Mark Maron. That was a pretty surreal moment, and a few other fun people that we ran into over there in LA.
Yeah, that was crazy. I love it because when we're in this MMA atmosphere, we have to be professional, and we can't be fanning out. And truth be told, I mean, we've been doing this for so long. I mean, the whole nostalgia of acting like fans, it doesn't really even occur to us. But here, when we're in a comedy club, it's like we're not working. We can just be fans, and it's like you mentioned the show Glow. I know you watch it with your girlfriend. It's about pro wrestling. It's an amazing show. If you haven't checked it out, it tells the story of pro wrestling in an amazing way, basically through a huge cast of women. One of them is kind of a bit of a loser. Another one is like a former soap actress, and they do such a good job of telling the story of pro wrestling. Anyway, Mark Maron is one of the main characters. We got to see him do a set. We saw him live, and then afterwards, ran in the back, got some photos with him. We got to meet Bobby Lee, who's kind of, I wouldn't say a hero of mine, but I grew up watching Mad TV. I know a lot of people shit on Mad TV, but I thought it was really funny, and I thought Bobby Lee was one of the funniest guys there. So it's awesome to be able able to meet Bobby Lee, and then Ali Wong, who's another comedian who I really like. She's got a show on Netflix, a Netflix special called Baby Cobra. Another one of those things that I got to watch with my girlfriend, so being able to meet her and have a brief chat was awesome. I think the comedians thought we were a bunch of stalkers just hanging out of the back, kind of waiting to meet everyone, but it was a great experience.
Yeah, we got Angelo Reyes coming on in a couple of minutes, but before we jump to him, and by the way, a big thank you to Christian, our videographer, and his fiance Stacy, who came on the trip as well. We were fantastic. We had a great house over in Anaheim, huge house. Actually had a pool in the back that we never even got into because we didn't get a chance to do it, and because on and off everyone was sick, we had to turn the aircon off in the middle of the night. It was pretty brutal. But quickly, got a couple of minutes before Angelo Reyes comes on. You have a funny story of how you bumped into Bobby Lee in the back there at the Comedy Store that I think fans might want to listen to. Do you want to quickly share it with us, Cass?
Well, I was in the bathroom. This is so fucking stalkerish, right? I was in the bathroom and I'm like, I think Mark Maron's going to be hanging around. Maybe I can sneak a cheeky photo. And I'm in the toilet and then I hear this distinct voice and I'm like, dude, that's Bobby Lee. Like, I'm pretty sure he's somewhere around. So anyway, I finish in the bathroom, I walk out and he's right there. Like, I didn't expect him to be right there. I thought, oh, he might be around the corner. He's right there. And I just thought, oh, it's all right. I'm not working. I don't have to be professional. No one knows me here. And I just thought, you know what? If I'm going to meet him, I should probably be kind of like a fan. I think he'll appreciate that more than, you know, some creepy guy coming out of the bathroom. So I saw him. I'm like, holy shit, you're fucking Bobby Lee, dude. And he grabbed me by the arm. And it was a sort of a weird interaction. He was, I don't know, he grabbed me by the arm and then he like made some jokes and I was just like, I don't really know how to handle this because the guy's energy is just through the roof and I'm like dying here of gypsy flu. And then I was like, dude, I love Mad TV. Do you mind if I grab a photo with you? And then, you know, he grabbed a photo and stayed and chatted really quick. And then as I'm getting this photo, Mark Maron walks behind us. I think he's being like shown like where everything is, what the setup is. And so I thank Bobby for the photo and I go to walk away and he like pulls me in by my arm and he says something about like, no worries, man. And on your way back, don't bump into Mark Maron again. Ha ha ha. And I don't know what the fuck he was on about because I never bumped into Mark Maron. He just happened to be walking behind. So that was pretty crazy interaction. And for me, it was special just watching Bobby Lee, like, you know, on Mad TV and on YouTube and watching all this hilarious, like the way he trolls interviewers and things like that. So getting to meet him was really cool. And then Mark Maron, that was a funny experience as well because like when we met Mark Maron, like you went first and you spoke to him and you were all like, you know, dude, I watch Glow with my girlfriend. I'm a big fan. I love your podcast, etc., etc. And then like I had to follow that and I had like the same fucking story. It's like, oh, hey, I also watch Glow and I also watch with my girlfriend. I'm also a big fan. So that was a funny way of meeting him. And he was like, honestly, you see him in Glow, you see his character, it's like just dead on the inside, no passion, and just complete apathy for life. And his, you know, the way he does his sets, that's kind of the same character that he plays. So when you meet him, you really don't know what to expect. And he was like the nicest guy, you know, you got a photo with him and he was like, let me see the photo, let me see if it turned out well. And then like it did turn out well. So he was like, all right, cool. And then like I met him, had a brief chat, got a photo, and he was just like the nicest guy. My first photo turned out really shit and I knew he was in a rush. So I kind of like, I had my arm around him. I just like pulled him underneath some lights and took another quick photo. And he just honestly could not have been a nicer guy. And the whole experience is just crazy, seeing all these comedians. And we got to see Tony Hinchcliffe as well. He dropped by completely unannounced at the world famous Comedy Store. So definitely some of the highlights from the trip, that and obviously Universal Studios and Disneyland. But anyway, that's enough about some of our highlights. Perfect timing to end this story on because I believe we're going to be talking about Paulie Malignaggi with our next guest. And Dennis, you're going to be introducing him.
All right, guys, this is a special treat. You know this man from his amazing work with Frank Mir and many other fighters. He is also co-host on The Cagesiders, which is a fantastic show you should be checking out right now. I am, of course, talking about Angelo Reyes, who is on the line with us here on Submission Radio. Back on the program, Angelo, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us here on the show.
Hey, Dennis, Casper, thanks for having me back, man. I love you guys' show. You guys are number one, especially on that side of the world. I'm looking forward to being back in Australia.
Awesome. And, yeah, number one all around, Angelo, but that's okay. We'll take number one over here as well. The reason why we've got you on the show...
That's what I actually meant, is I said, you guys are number one all around. I'm looking forward to be back in Australia. Come on, baby. Right. You know I was pushing you guys.
Number one in Angelo's heart. Angelo, we really appreciate the time. Like we said, you're a busy man. You're in the car right now. You're traveling between shows. We've got you for a quick 10 minutes. And we wanted to talk to you about Paulie Malignaggi and the situation that's been all over the news with his sparring with Conor McGregor. People may not know, but you and Paulie Malignaggi are close friends. You've been around for a really long time around him, and you were actually with him after the first 8-round sparring session that he had with Conor McGregor. So the first thing I want to kick off is, when you saw what happened with Paulie, him being unhappy, walking away from Conor McGregor as a sparring partner, what were your thoughts on that and the fact that, I suppose, the situation really didn't play out how Paulie had hoped?
Yeah, I know. Like, first of all, I mean, Paulie's already said it. He said it on his show, From Brooklyn to the World. That's his own podcast. He's actually about to go on our podcast today, TakeSiders.com, and we're going to talk a little bit more in depth. But first time he was here was 2 weeks ago before Garcia-Broner, the Mikey Garcia-Broner fight. He flew in on a Wednesday, then he sparred on that Thursday. He was only supposed to spar a 6-rounder. They made him do an 8-rounder. But Paulie, again, is a very truthful, very honest, very open person. And he really was under the impression that the reason why the McGregor team and the McGregor group was bringing him into the team is to help Conor understand how to be a better boxer. And in sparring, that's what it's designed to do. I mean, first of all, I've never even heard of sparring partners going more than 4 rounds. I mean, like, for the most part, you're supposed to hire 3 to 4 sparring partners. And then, like, I remember when Freddie Roach would do this with Manny Pacquiao, he would hire out 3 or 4 partners. They would, at the most, for a whole week, those guys would only spar Manny maybe 9 rounds, maybe 10, like, because they rotate around each other. And you're supposed to put a fresh sparring partner in so that Manny can go 12 rounds, and Manny would have to really push himself to be sharp for 12 rounds. Certainly it's not normal to have a guy fly in across the country, from New York to Vegas, and then right away, like, without even getting rid of the jet lag, you're just throwing him right in there, and then you're throwing him in for 8. You know, and again, we're talking about a Paulie Malignaggi who already retired in March, hasn't been training for boxing, hasn't been training to do any of that at all. And so with his open heart, he was like, hey, man, these guys need my help. I'm a 2-time world champion. I have something that I can offer and bring to the table. So Paulie was really like saying to himself, okay, cool. I'm going to be open-minded. I'm going to go in there. And if they start asking me and they start talking to me about, what Conor could do better, what he's doing good, what he's doing bad, then he would open up. Instead, I specifically remember, because one of the things that upsets Paulie is that I couldn't even be there. He couldn't bring any of his coaches to help him out. Didn't even give him water. So it just had to be Paulie. So I remember, like, on the first day he sparred, I drove to the crack house that he calls, where they had, that's what he was calling the place that Conor had all the partners and I think a cut man and a masseuse all staying in this one place. And it is it's not the greatest neighborhood here in Las Vegas. And, that's where Paulie was staying at.
Just talk to us about, sorry to interrupt you there, Angelo. Just talk to us about the house, because I think that's something that a lot of people are curious about as far as the actual conditions. What was so bad about it?
Well, okay. On the first night, I didn't get to go inside, but just from driving there, the difference between driving in a nice neighborhood like in Summerlin or in Centennial or in some of the gated communities here in Las Vegas. And then there's this house, which is like right next to the freeway. And it's in an area where you pretty much know, okay, man, this isn't exactly the best place. Like I wouldn't want Paulie to walk out of the house and start walking down the street, and keep walking, because it's not in that area. I think he makes a joke when he says he calls it the crack house, but in truth, it's not a great place. I mean, like, if that's where you're putting your sparring partners when you're supposed to be making $100 million, you could have just easily gotten them in any of the hotels here, gotten them a room for probably, let's say, at the most $50 a night, and gotten each person a room on their own. But yeah, no, man. I mean, it just, definitely. I mean, Manny Pacquiao, for example, has been known to do things. I know one of the sparring partners he helped out. He got to befriend the sparring partner so much that he even helped pay the down payment for that sparring partner's house so that person could buy his first home. I mean, like that's the type of like you become a part of the team. You're supposed to be a part of the team. And just like Paulie said, the way Conor's treating the sparring partners. And it's not like Paulie tried to negotiate anything. He wasn't trying to one-up them. He wasn't doing any of that. He was just like, you know what, man, whatever. Whatever you're going to give me is what you're going to give me. I'm just going to do it. But Paulie actually thought in his head, okay, well, these guys aren't going to be a bunch of classless individuals. I mean, heck, man, they're making $100 million. This guy's with the UFC, which is the best MMA organization in the world. There's no way I'm going to be treated like some punk. And instead, it's actually the opposite. So again, going back to that, I drove there to see him that night. So he finished the 8-round sparring. I couldn't be there. And Paulie couldn't bring any of his coaches from the East Coast or anything like that. So I met him just there at the house, and he walked outside, because I wasn't going to go in the house, and then we just chopped it up in front of the crack house, as he calls it, and we talked about the sparring, and we talked about how he's feeling. He talked to me about the jet lag, and I remember specifically even saying to Paulie, "Man, bro, I can't believe they have you staying in this place, man. I mean, you're a first ballot Hall of Famer. You're a future Hall of Famer, dude, and this is how they're treating you." And he was like, "You know what, Angelo? I remember a time in my life when I would have been honored to do this for free because of the experience. So, always, and he told me, he said, always keep in mind, man, that arrogance will get you nowhere, and, just be humble. And I'm fine. I got my room right there, anytime I'm not going to be with Conor, I can just call you and we could hang out. So we were just chopping it up, and then we talked about techniques, and again, Paulie's already talked about that. I remember telling him I don't need to see what Conor's game plan is. He's a karate guy, so I pretty much know, how he's going to move anyways. I mean, he's not going to move like a boxer that's going to be good enough to even contend against, someone like Floyd. I've already said this publicly, so all the Conor lovers will hate me for saying it again, but I've always said, man, there's levels to it. I even just recently said, could you imagine someone like Conor McGregor putting on a gi, challenging the best gi jiu-jitsu person in the world and expecting him to win right now without, with even just less 8 weeks worth of training? Just because he knows jiu-jitsu doesn't mean he's a major player at it. So it's the same in boxing. Why can't people look at that as the same? And in boxing, jiu-jitsu is one of the purest forms of art on its own, and it's a chess playing game. Well, boxing is a chess playing martial arts too. So me and Paulie kind of did some simulations, and then we talked about oh yeah, no, Angelo, you're right. When he does throw that move right there, and then I was able to hit him this way, and I said, yeah, Paulie, actually it's pretty easy because what happens is they do this, and then you do this move, and we had fun with that. So then he told me, he said, hey man, he always lets me know last minute. There's not actually a regular schedule. I'm gonna let you know, when we'll be able to kind of be together again, but nobody's allowed in there except for him. So that same week he was supposed to spar again that Saturday, right? So instead, Paulie didn't get to spar him because and this is with Conor fully knowing that Paulie had to leave on Sunday to be able to get back to New York Monday so that he can do the fight week for Mikey Garcia versus Adrian Broner. So then that Saturday, what ended up happening is he doesn't spar. I pick up Paulie in the afternoon. We're hanging out, and then we ended up watching the UFC Kelvin Gastelum versus Chris Weidman show in a restaurant, and eating good food, just chopping it up, talking it up. So that's what happened on the first week he was here. So this past week when he arrived pretty late on a Monday, and then he was already telling me, he was texting me, hey Angelo, man. I'm really getting a bad feeling about, all of these guys. They're just trying to set me up. But I'm going to beat his ass, because I already know that I'm going to go 12 rounds. So I'm thinking okay, cool. Right. So then he does the 12 rounds. And again, Paulie's already told his story. You guys can, again, check it out from Brooklyn to New York on that podcast. So I don't want to repeat it, but we saw him. I picked him up. And then he hung out with us the very next day, and I brought him to go see Frank do some of the jiu-jitsu at Drysdale, and Paulie was hanging out with us all day, and we were actually with Paulie till probably 2 in the morning, maybe 1 in the morning that that evening, just, eating Chinese food and hanging out. At one point, in fact, check this out, guys. At one point, I remember the Chinese restaurant we were eating at, it's like midnight. We're eating there. It's me, Hana Hulatan, my son. We're all just, hanging out. We're talking boxing. We're talking about all this stuff. And I said to Paulie jokingly, I was like, hey, it'd be hella funny right now? Since Mayweather's gym is like a block away, let's walk over there, take a picture of you in front of the Mayweather gym. And Paulie even said, you know what, bro, you know me, man. I'm not a unclassy bastard. I would never do that. I never even wanted to think that way, that I'm like trying to rat on his game plan or anything like that. So we didn't do that. Hindsight being 20/20, just the other day he texted me and he goes, looking back at it, bro, it would have been hella funny if we did go to Mayweather's gym and just walked into the gym on that night when we were all having dinner. Again, man, Paulie went into it with every intention. So and again,
Angelo, sorry to cut in there. We just have a couple of minutes left. It's fascinating. Your relationship with him is really, really impressive. Before we let you go, I just want to quickly get your thoughts. The photos were released. It looked like Paulie was on the ground. He did the interview with the MMA Hour. He said it was a push down. There are some people out there, though, that believe,
no, it's a push down.
Maybe
guys,
he's making this
100%.
up. Maybe this is a knockdown. Can you just give us your reaction to, number one, the photos being released, and number two, your reaction to people believing, that it was actually McGregor knocking him down?
McGregor releasing the photos, that's a punk ass move. Because if you really did do good, you don't need to tell anyone else. Your sparring partners will know. If you did great, you're going to know. So I agree with what Paulie said. Release the unedited version of the ass kicking that Conor received on that sparring session, and then everybody can see for themselves. Now, that round where Paulie got pushed specifically was one of Paulie's most dominant rounds. He was beating up Conor so badly in that round that Conor got frustrated and just pushed him and shoved him, and then Paulie fell into the ground. Again, there's ethics in boxing. There is ethics in boxing. And if you're really as good a champion as you are, you don't need to flaunt it, and like Paulie has said, it's kind of funny how, everybody wants to say all these negative things about Floyd. Well, I've met Floyd, and Floyd's the nicest person you will meet. Like, he is amazingly nice. All about his kids, all about his family. And so he'll put on a show for the camera and make you upset maybe with some of the things he might say on camera. But at the end of the day, it's a show. And it's like what Floyd says. Love him or hate him, it's, he appreciates you because you're supporting him. And then Paulie, just like you said, man, Conor's the complete opposite. He's actually a prick. He's renting a Lamborghini while he's got his sparring partners in a crack house. He's not treating, future Hall of Fame boxers like Paulie Malignaggi the right way, and then he's putting out fake photos, so at the end of the day, it makes the boxing, they probably are going to get more pay-per-view buys now, guys, but now the boxing community, Conor forgot, man, that the boxing community is a very tight, small community, and if he ever plans on coming back to boxing, basically every single person that he's going to fight, he's going to want to beat his ass. So even Lomachenko just recently said, hey, man, I'll go spar with you. That wasn't like an offer to help, I don't think. I think that's him saying, hey, man, I just fought this last Saturday, beat the hell out of that guy who's the number one contender, and I'll beat the hell out of you too, even though I'm only 135 pounds. But I'll spar with you since Paulie's gone. So again, it's what Conor did is wrong. If he was smart, he should just apologize for it. We all know he's not going to. So that's fine. He's just going to get an ass whooping on August 26th anyways. So he can apologize then.
Well, if anything, it does pump the fight up. Obviously, we feel for Paulie in this situation. And it's an interesting situation in general, Angelo, and we appreciate you coming on and chatting with us on the show. Guys, don't forget, he is the co-host on The Cage Side. It's a fantastic show. You can follow them at The Cage Siders. We always appreciate your time, Angelo, and we love chatting with you. Thank you so much for jumping on the show, and we'll definitely chat to you in the soon.
Thank you, guys. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. That means everywhere, too. You guys are the best everywhere.
We love it. Appreciate it, Angelo. You have a great day. Thank you.
There he is, Angelo Reyes. So much fun having him on the program. A lot more to talk about when it comes to Paulie Malignaggi. And we have a very special guest joining us here on the program to talk about that and so much more. I'm, of course, talking about our brother from another mother, Damon Martin, joining us here on the program. We know his great work from Flow Combat. Damon, thanks for joining us back on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me as always, boys. I appreciate it.
Well, the pleasure is always ours. We always love having you on. And let's continue this Paulie Malignaggi discussion. I mean, we just had Angelo Reyes sharing his thoughts on the intricacies and what Paulie went through as a sparring partner for Conor McGregor. So I guess we'll throw it to you first, Damon. We all saw the interviews that Paulie gave, spoke to the MMA Hour, broke down the second sparring session with McGregor and claimed that he dominated Conor in the second half of the 12-round spar. People like Dana White, Lorenzo Fertitta were invited to watch. There were photographers taking photos. And he had a bit of a negative situation with McGregor after the 12 rounds where he asked for the photos not to be published. McGregor responded with, I don't know, Paulie, we got some good ones in those last 2 rounds. I don't know about that. And he walked off, turned his back to him. So there's a lot of stuff going on. He also spoke about some deplorable conditions that the sparring partners were treated to for a $100 million fight. Have you had a chance to wrap your head around all the stuff that's been coming out about it? And I mean, what's your take on it, Damon?
Well, there's a lot to unpack with this whole situation. I think with the sparring sessions, I think what started out as some kind of innocent, I don't want to say innocent, but just some interviews talking about it from Paulie Malignaggi. From what I've heard and from the sources I've spoken to, the photos coming out originally, were kind of in response to some of the interviews Paulie was doing when he was saying that Conor had above average power, but not oh my God power, and just kind of talking a little bit out of turn about their sparring session. When, typically sparring sessions are supposed to stay inside the gym. You're really not supposed to talk about them at all, whether you're talking about, strategy or not, which, Paulie has said numerous times he wouldn't do. But, I mean, come on, when you're saying the guy doesn't hit that hard or he hits kind of hard, but he doesn't hit that hard. And, now he's talking about hitting to the body and things like that. I mean, that's stuff that you typically don't see or you're typically not supposed to do. And so I had heard that was a big part in why the photos started coming out, was kind of in response to that. I think both sides have a little bit to blame, have to take a little bit of the blame in that whole situation. But, as far as Paulie's gripes and everything, I mean, listen, I can't fault the guy for having his own legitimate gripes, but at the same time, the analogy I've been using all week, and this is not me taking a dig at Paulie Malignaggi, and this is not me just taking Conor McGregor's side because he's the MMA guy. This is just my opinion. But I wonder if he had a similar experience with Floyd Mayweather, would he be coming out and saying these things? I think there's a little bit of perception of not wanting to lose face when it comes to the MMA guy. Conor is kind of stepping into boxing territory, and every boxer that you speak to will tell you Conor's going to get killed. He has absolutely no chance in there against Floyd Mayweather. So what does it say if another boxer, a former champion like Paulie Malignaggi, goes in there and actually loses, or, let's just say hypothetically loses a sparring session to Conor? What does it say? So, if the situations are reversed and Paulie was in Floyd's camp, and let's say, Floyd, knocked him around a little bit, released a couple of photos. I have a hard time believing that Paulie would be so publicly bashing Floyd Mayweather the way he's kind of coming after Conor McGregor. Now, again, I don't know the entire inside story, and really we're only hearing one side of the story because obviously Conor's not addressing it, and I don't know that he'll ever address it. He's focused on his fight. So it's kind of a weird thing. And then just the kind of constant bombardment, I guess, is the same thing. And kind of like at some point you're like, okay, you talk about it once or twice and be done with it. When you continue to kind of a barrage of interviews and you just keep adding on to it, at some point you're like, all right, dude, we get it. You had a bad experience. Not saying you had to let it go, but you're just kind of piling on. At some point, the feeling of sympathy kind of goes to like where people are going to say, okay, that enough's enough.
It's interesting because when I heard Paulie on the MMA Hour, to me, he came off extremely honest, didn't really come off like a guy with an agenda. It was kind of fascinating. And again, much like you, Damon, I respect and understand the fact this is just one side of the story. We don't know what the Conor McGregor camp will say. And I feel like a lot of the things that Paulie's saying, I think he believes them 100%. I don't think he's fabricating anything, but I also feel like some of it may just come down to misunderstandings. I think maybe some of the things that he's taken personally, while understandable, and if you or me or someone else is in that position, I think we might take it the same way, but I question whether the intent from the McGregor camp was really as malicious as they've been painted. It's pretty interesting because obviously Conor keeps an incredibly tight-knit team. His team's loyalty to him is unparalleled. If you hear John Kavanagh, or Owen Roddy, or Dylan Dennis, or James Gallagher, or Adam Lobov, or Paddy Houlihan, the way they speak about him, it's like they're so cautious about what they say in interviews because they don't even want to entertain the idea of possibly saying something that puts Conor in a negative light. It's almost like they all feel indebted to him to a degree. So this is really the first time that somebody has come in with first-hand knowledge and first-hand of experiences when dealing with Conor McGregor that has really the complete opposite to say and has said nothing but really negative things, and it's someone who obviously is first-hand experience with him that isn't an opponent. So I found the whole thing very interesting. I'm curious what you guys think as far as, and obviously there was the moment where Errol asked Paulie, do you see a fight happening in the future? Is that kind of what you're angling for? And he shut it down. So he didn't really come off like a guy with an agenda. I'm curious what you guys think, specifically Dennis. Did you think that Paulie's sort of, I guess, doing all these extra interviews, do you think he's overdone it, or do you think it was important for him to sort of go out there and, just be a guy who tells his side of the story? And let's be honest, we know, as we are all media, sometimes when fighters are doing a whole bunch of interviews, it may seem like, they're really milking it. But at the end of the day, I mean, if the media keeps bombarding you for interviews, and if we ask the questions, you're going to get quotes. You're going to get people saying these kinds of things. What did you make of it all, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, I can't fault Paulie for doing all the interviews. We try to contact him to get him on the show as well. And if the requests are there and you say yes to him, I mean, it's not really your fault all this stuff is coming out. But at the same time, you could clearly see that he went into this to, I don't want to say keep himself relevant, because you'll always be relevant in the boxing world, but he saw, the hoo-ha around McGregor. He started his own podcast, and I'm sure this creates a lot of momentum for his new podcast. And, it doesn't hurt his name in the world of MMA. But to me, this whole thing, I really didn't care about it whatsoever. To me, this has nothing to do with the fight. And it's just, I'm surprised people are so surprised with sparring partners being mistreated. Number one, Conor McGregor isn't a boxer, and I'm sure his camp don't have that much experience in running a $100 million boxing fight camp. And housing all these extra sparring partners who are outside their team that they've brought in. So maybe mistakes have been made. But one of the things that I'm surprised people haven't pointed out was the fact, and I think Damon Martin kind of alluded to this a little bit before, is the fact that, when is this the first time that sparring partners have been mistreated by huge champions? I mean, I know Angelo spoke about how Manny Pacquiao helped someone put a down payment on their house, but, truthfully, you've had heaps of champions in the history of boxing who, may have not treated as sparring partners great. A lot of sparring partners getting crappy treatment or crappy pay or stayed in crappy accommodation. So it's not really something new, and it doesn't really affect my opinion on the fight whatsoever. So I understand Paulie and the fact that he's been approached for interviews, and that's why we constantly see these headlines and constantly see him do these interviews, and it helps these media outlets get a lot of views. But I'm just completely sick of hearing about it. To me, it has no implication on the fight. And for Paulie as well, I mean, look, going into this, he wanted to help Conor McGregor. I'm sure, he had a lot of good motivation behind it. But at the same time, this was a thing for him as well, to get out into the headlines, to be a part of this huge fight. And I'm sure, I mean, he was talking about some of the negativity and some of the stuff that happened, the 12 rounds, the 8 rounds. Sure, it's all... None of it makes really much sense. The stuff that he went through about not being able to bring coaches, people standing there, watching the fight, probably hoping to see Conor McGregor knock him out. Sure, that's not great stuff. But if I was Paulie, I'd be expecting this from the get-go. I mean, they had some back and forth. He was going in there. I think a lot of people understood this. Conor McGregor had him there because he wanted an opportunity to sort of shut him up and show him that he was better than he says he is. And, there's the photo of him being pushed down, and Paulie says he was dominating Conor in that fight. But even like Damon said, when you bring that stuff out, when you talk about sparring sessions, to a lot of people, that's a little bit like sour grapes. Yeah, sure, you were dominating in the fight, and that's why the photo came out. I think when it comes to perception from fans, a lot of them are just a little bit sick of hearing Paulie talk about this. And unless the unedited footage comes out, I think people are just sick and tired of just dealing with he said, she said, this guy said this, and that guy said this. And if it never comes out, does it even matter? Does it really even have an implication on this fight? To me, it doesn't really. But what I took away from it was I was just impressed that Conor McGregor was able to hang in there with Paulie for as long as he did. To me, that almost makes me think he's come along a lot further than I thought previously. But apart from that, I didn't really have many takeaways from it. I don't know, Damon. What do you guys think? Do you think this thing needs to be buried already? Or do you guys want to keep seeing this thing pop up leading into the fight?
Well, I mean, at some point, listen, it keeps things relevant with the fight. I mean, just, talking about it, I guess. But to me, it's the wrong attention. I mean, you're painting Conor in a negative light. And I'm not saying, Paulie should be painting him in a positive light. If he really feels this way, I'd rather him speak honestly than, come out and say, oh, he's the greatest guy in the world. And, he beat me up. I don't want him to lie. I want him to be honest. But it's not the attention we want. The attention should be on McGregor and Mayweather. They're the ones fighting. And I understand, like I said, Paulie, because Conor and Floyd aren't doing a lot of interviews right now. I know Floyd just spoke to ESPN today, and obviously as the fight draws near, Conor will do some interviews and Floyd will do some interviews. But, this is kind of like the conversation is being driven towards Paulie right now. And listen, I don't fault the guy for taking advantage of the moment where you can get some press, but I just think it's the press for the wrong reasons. I think that, if you want to talk about Conor and you want to talk about the fight, and you want to break things down, I get it. But I just think it's the wrong kind of attention. And like I said, I think over time, what your point was or what your point was being in talking about this whole thing kind of gets lost, because you kind of take away, people's sympathy for you. When you come out there and you say these things about Conor and you talk about the training partners, you talk about the conditions, things like that. Say it once or twice, people say, wow, man, that's pretty bad. But when you continue to keep saying it and then you keep adding, with each interview, more stuff continues to come out. It's like, okay, dude, like we get it. You had a bad experience, but when's enough? And so I think that's kind of my problem. It's just the wrong timing for all this to come out.
Interesting takes, guys. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about something completely different other than Mac, which we'll be talking about a lot in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure, other than Paulie Malignaggi. Something interesting happened, and that was, of course, WME-IMG receiving $1.1 billion in investments from the Canadian Pension Plan and also the Singapore Wealth Fund. Silver Lake Partners reported that WME-IMG will use the $1.1 billion to buy out some minority partners. That includes Flash Entertainment, allegedly, the Fertitta brothers, and Dana White. Not all of them will be bought out fully, though, and WME-IMG will expand to a 51% majority stake ownership in the UFC, raise their value from an estimated $5.5 billion to an estimated $6.3 billion. I feel like some of this is a little bit above our pay grade, Damon, so can you put it in perspective? What did you think when you saw these kind of moves happening with WME-IMG?
Well, it's interesting because, when they bought the organization, we've all been talking about WME-IMG being the owners, but in reality, they haven't had the majority share of the ownership. So, this is just a move for them to, get in complete control of the organization, to have no other partners involved besides the investors they want to have involved, people like Silver Lake Financial and some of the other people that kind of bonded together with them to buy the UFC last year. I think the Flash Entertainment, the Abu Dhabi, when this whole thing first came together, the people I talked to, that was the bulk of it, because the people at Flash Entertainment owned, I believe, 10% of the UFC, and that's a pretty big chunk, when you really think about it. So 10%. Now, I know what was left over from the Fertittas and Dana White was very small. I don't know that they're going to buy them completely out. I would imagine Dana will still hold on to some sort of ownership stake. Just because he's going to continue to be with the organization. I don't know about the Fertittas, and I don't know how much of a percentage that is, but I think that's what this is ultimately about, getting to that 51% mark so WME-IMG ultimately controls the reins on the decision-making. You've got the new television deal coming up next year, and I think obviously they want to have control of that. Ari Emanuel is one of the negotiators who actually landed them the Fox deal 7 years ago, so I think he wants to be in control of that. I think this is just another move to put WME-IMG in control of the UFC, and so they have 100% say in the control of the organization, especially, with this funding. The other thing it helps them do is it helps them avoid, having to go public. There's been a lot of rumors for the past couple of years, even before WME-IMG bought the UFC, that they were considering going public and basically having a stock offering, because that could bring in a ton of money with the IPO and then eventually with the stock sales, and that helps recoup a lot of the money that's being spent. But this influx of cash, being able to buy out their partners, being able to have some of their executives who want to cash out some stock or some ownership in the organization and get some money back out of it, it allows them to pay them as well, and it keeps them from having to go public, for another year or two, or maybe forever, if they can start really turning a profit on this thing.
But I guess the big question, Damon, is in terms of Dana White and the future of him with the company. I mean, we were around him in Anaheim, but you get fighters like Jon Jones basically saying, "Oh, I want to deal with the real boss." Do you believe Dana White will be in Ari Emanuel's plans as they continue to take over the company? Do you believe he'll have the same power like we've known him to have, all this time?
I think so, at least to a certain extent. I mean, listen, WME-IMG has a big portfolio. I mean, not only do they own, the UFC is one of their biggest, but they also own, the professional bull riders. They own, obviously the Miss America pageant. They're also a huge Hollywood powerhouse agency. They represent a ton of stars and a ton of, football players, basketball players. I mean, they represent a ton of people. So they got a lot of oars in the water. So, I don't think Ari and Patrick Whitesell want to micromanage everything. They need somebody to run the organizations that they have while they're kind of doing the bigger picture kind of stuff, like the TV deal coming up. That's one thing Dana will probably be very hands off on. He probably won't deal with that at all. That'll all be Ari and Patrick Whitesell. So that's what I talk about. They need a Dana White or somebody to kind of run the organization. And I don't know that there's anybody else that would be more qualified than Dana White. So I think he's going to stick around. I think he'll stay in control of the organization. He'll continue to run the day-to-day. And then the bigger major decisions like the TV deal, like international TV rights, like, maybe some of the major fights that get put together, like a Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, that's where you'll see an Ari Emanuel or a Patrick Whitesell step in and kind of play their part in this ownership. But I think Dana is still an integral part because they can't do what he does and still run all their other businesses.
And I think the thing about Dana as well is I think Ari knows as being an agent for Hollywood and having all these actors is Dana White is almost more popular than, 70%, 80% of the UFC roster. And when you have him talk, people listen. So it's almost like the WWE when they have a general manager or a commissioner and they just have a purely on-air kind of role. In a lot of ways, Dana White doing these press conferences, doing these scrums, being in the middle of these stare downs, there's a certain value to that outside of what he's doing behind the scenes that I think WME-IMG knows fans love about it and will pay attention to. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, let's talk about the next I suppose, topic that is in a way related to Dana White, because he was there in Anaheim and he switched up his thoughts as to who Bisping was going to be fighting next. A lot of people believed that Robert Whittaker was the next man on the line to fight him, but then GSP was switched in with Tyron Woodley's performance not being the greatest. News came out, though, due to an article by Brett Okamoto where Robert Whittaker actually admitted the UFC offered him a tough spot against Bisping. However, a deal couldn't be reached. Robert Whittaker said, they approached me right after the fight, but I hadn't seen my kids and my family in weeks. It's not as if I live 2 hours away. I live 24 hours away. For me, realistically, look at that. You need to make it worth my while. I would have had to do all my rehab in the States. I would have had to bring my entire family to the States, take the kids out of school. The offer just wasn't enough. I counted with offers, not just financial figures, but a lot of conditions as well. We just couldn't come to an agreement. So, Casper, I'm just wondering, when you saw this and that it couldn't come together, what was your reaction? Because Robert Whittaker versus Michael Bisping in TUF, if you think about it, that's a good move for his career to really get his name value out there, especially to the people all over the United States.
Yeah, I think in some ways it could have been perfect for Rob Whittaker because obviously he's not a guy who's going to go out there and really try and sell his fight. He's going to do exactly what he needs to and nothing really extra. Obviously, Michael Bisping is the complete opposite. He takes any and every opportunity to sell a fight, make career moves, set up other fights that, may or may not even happen. And I think with Robert Whittaker, he's obviously got the skill. He doesn't yet have the star power. And that's kind of something that people pointed to with UFC 213. We had both Romero and Whittaker as two guys who weren't really going to sell the fight much. I guess the thing in Rob's favor is the fact that he's got a huge demographic of Australia behind him. And I think that if he didn't have that, if he didn't have a pay-per-view market behind him, the UFC may push him very differently. But here's the thing. I think the fact that Rob denied this or declined the offer, I think it gives you insight into Rob's mindset. It's something that you and me, Dennis, have known for a very long time, and I think a lot of people are figuring out now. And I think it's that he's not going to go out of his way for any kind of extra promotional activities outside of fighting and training if it interferes with his family life. He sort of alluded in interviews in the past that his wife had a serious conversation with him at some point a few years ago about family and his duties, and it seems like they have a certain, I guess, understanding and agreement on how much he has to help out and put in despite his career as a UFC fighter. I think he's also not the kind of guy who really wants to be pulled from his comfort zone and have to rehab his knee in another country. I think that he'd rather do it in Australia if he can. And of course, TUF is a lot of work. And I think for Rob, improving and being the best, that's the number one priority. He's obviously admittedly still in the skill building stage of his development as a fighter, and he's spoken about how he has all these gaps to fill. He's going up against guys like Yoel Romero, who on paper have better wrestling than him, so he needs to bring his wrestling game up. He's going up against certain strikers that he needs to keep working his striking, his jiu-jitsu and everything. He's very young in the sport, or at least he's young. He's only 26 years old, and so I don't think he wants to impede that development by taking time off from training to film, a TV show that, let's be honest, and here's the other thing, not that many people watch TUF anymore, so yes, it'd be a great way to go out there and bring his personality out and sort of have Michael Bisping do a lot of the work. Michael Bisping would obviously be the bad guy. Rob would be the nice guy, the nice, gentle, caring coach who looks after his guys and just, kind of by default is made to look like a good guy. But yeah, I don't know. I think in some ways it kind of works out better for Rob because he knew that there was not a whole lot that he could do to stop this GSP fight happening. And I think that if he pushed and fought in November, I mean, who knows how well his knee would really rehab? Who knows how much more, training he'd be getting in? This TUF season, it'd probably be filmed, I think later this year, and it probably wouldn't happen. The actual fight wouldn't happen till later in the year. So I think in this way, it kind of works out better for Rob because he has this time, the pressure is off himself, he goes in the shadows, he rehabs his knee, he gets extra training, and then when he does fight Bisping, which is a huge opportunity, or GSP, whoever the winner is, he's got that extra training and he's gotten that rest in his body, and he didn't have to go out and, rearrange his entire life and miss out on extra training. What do you think, Damon?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I see both sides of it. I see, why you'd want to do the Ultimate Fighter because you have the opportunity to kind of get your name a little bit more well known in the United States. Even though the Ultimate Fighter, isn't that watched. This is a bigger season with 125-pound women, fighting for a title and things like that. They would probably fight in December, I'm guessing, because that's when the finale would be. At least again, I'm just guessing. I don't know that for a fact. Because I imagine that's when Gaethje and Alvarez will fight is in December. So, you give him a little bit more time to rehab and things like that. And also, if they're actually going to give him the fight with Michael Bisping and guarantee he's going to get him in December, then there's reasons to take it. But I also respect, Robert being honest about why he doesn't want to do it. He has a family. That's what's most important to him. They live in Australia. He doesn't want to have to bring them all the way to the United States and kind of uproot their lives for, 6 or 8 weeks to do all this. And, listen, I'm not going to fault a guy for having his priorities in line. Some guys, they want the stardom, they want the fame, they want the attention, they want the spotlight. And I appreciate that. Other guys don't care about it as much. And I think Robert Whittaker is one of those guys who just doesn't care about it as much. So, ultimately, he decided not to take it. I don't really fault him for that. I think, the only mistake that could be made out of this whole thing is if George St. Pierre ends up beating Michael Bisping, the chances of George St. Pierre staying at middleweight is still very much up in the air. I mean, that's not a sure thing. So if he beats Bisping and then decides, hey, I'm going to go down and fight for welterweight now, or I'm going to go down and I'm going to try to go all the way down to lightweight or something crazy like that, then Whittaker's just stuck in a tough position because if GSP just vacates it, then yeah, maybe Robert is declared the champion. He's declared the unanimous, middleweight champion, the undisputed middleweight champion, but there's always going to be that dispute, just like at featherweight when Conor left. The title got handed off. Now, Max Holloway feels like a more legit champion because he went out there and beat Jose Aldo, but you don't want those questions surrounding your title reign. You don't want to feel like you got handed the title as opposed to earning the title. And so that's where I think Whittaker could run into some sticky situations is if GSP wins and then he doesn't get to fight GSP, yeah, he's the champion, but who does he fight next? Does he fight Rockhold? Does he wait and see if Bisping can get a win and come back? There's a million questions at that point. I think that's where the problem comes in.
That's a good point. And, Dana White was in Anaheim. And he said, the winner of that fight will fight Robert Whittaker. And if anybody out there really believes GSP is going to go out of his way to fight Robert Whittaker, then you guys must be crazy. And even Robert Whittaker was on our show, and he didn't even seem that keen to fight GSP himself. So that's not going to be a fight that's going to be happening if GSP wins, not in my books at all. And I really thought that the UFC avoided the stupidity of this whole situation very, very closely. They could have just made this Tyron Woodley GSP fight. However, we all saw what happened. Woodley didn't perform as to what Dana White expected, and the fight fell through. But there was a journalist in the room who made a really, really good point about how Tyron Woodley, he's almost got this Floyd Mayweather-esque hate going on about him, where people want to sort of see him get beaten, and who better to bring in than GSP? It's a classic tale of a heel and a face, where GSP comes in, fights a Tyron Woodley. At the same time, Woodley, if he beats GSP, he'll get a lot more respect for himself, and GSP will be back to sort of where he belongs. So Casper, I'm just curious, what do you think about this GSP Bisping fight back on, and Woodley missing out on fighting GSP?
Yeah, I'm honestly sick of it. I'm sick of this roller coaster. It's the fight that was happening, then it was, and then it was, then it. We were in that media scrum, and I think it was Carolyn Pierce from BT Sport who brought up the GSP Bisping fight. And I remember when she asked that question, she sort of asked like, has the ship sailed? And I remember thinking like, oh man, like this is really dated. Like, why are we even still talking about this? It's been sailed for a long time. And Dana White made the big point saying absolutely it's sailed. And then obviously just a little over 24 hours later, he's saying that it's back on. I don't like... Look, honestly, I think the UFC just wanted to do that fight. I don't think it had anything to do with Tyron Woodley's performance. And I'm curious what you think about this, Damon, as well. I don't think that they made that decision halfway through the fight because of the way Tyron performed. I mean, let's be honest, for all the crap that Tyron gets about how that fight played out and how it wasn't that exciting. And it wasn't exciting, but I feel like he did what he had to do. GSP has had that same criticism for a very, very long time. I mean, a lot of his fights, you can look back through the archives, a lot of his fights weren't that exciting. And before he left, he was probably the most criticized champ. People saying that, he couldn't finish anything, he doesn't finish fights, he fights safe. I remember when he had that lunch with Dana White, people were joking, did he even finish his meal? So I think that, a lot of that criticism that Tyron is receiving, I don't think it's fair. And I think that the way Dana White just kind of buried him and threw him under the bus, where he should have just admitted, look, there's been a change. Or maybe he shouldn't have even said that, look, GSP is definitely fighting the winner. If they didn't know if things were up in the air, then they shouldn't have let the cat out of the bag, and they definitely shouldn't have blamed the UFC's swerving entirely on Tyron Woodley. I think it just... there's no reason to sandbag a champion like that. Dana White is a promoter. I feel like Dana White's a smart guy. It would have been so easy for him to just defend that performance and say, look, Demian Maia is this, Demian Maia goes out, he makes guys look foolish, Tyron did what he had to do, etc., etc. 7 guys who got taken down by Demian Maia, Tyron Woodley stuffed in X amount of takedowns. And so I think the way he went about it was just ridiculous. What do you think, Damon?
Yeah, I think Tyron Woodley, I don't think he's above criticism for that performance. I don't fault him for the game plan, but I think he's absolutely due some criticism for not going out there maybe late in that fight, 4th or 5th round, really kind of putting it on Maia when Maia was clearly exhausted and shooting from halfway across the octagon to try to get a takedown. I think there's legit criticism of Tyron Woodley's performance, and I think that's okay. I think it's okay to criticize a fighter when it's not their best night. When Tyron Woodley, when we all kind of know that he's capable of so much more, I don't fault him for the game plan, but I can also honestly say it wasn't a great fight. That being said, Dana White's not the guy who's supposed to say that. You and I, all of us are supposed to say that. Maybe some fellow fighters are supposed to say that. Dana White, the guy who 6 months from now is going to tell you to buy a Tyron Woodley pay-per-view, should not be the guy saying it. So I didn't agree with him at all. The one thing the biggest problem I had with this whole GSP thing, and I said this numerous times, you can go back and look at my Twitter account and see that I said this, I've always said I thought the Bisping and GSP fight was going to happen. I don't know why they kept dancing around the idea that it wasn't going to happen. It was almost like Dana was trying to prove a point by saying, I'm yanking this fight away from GSP to show he had some power, because after the Conor McGregor situation, where it seemed like Conor has all the power now, it's almost like Dana wanted to, show that he still had control, that he still was the matchmaker. He was still the guy, who could go out there and make things happen or not happen. Fact of the matter is this: when Georges St-Pierre came back, he said, day one, I want big fights and I want to add to my legacy. Now, I'm not saying that beating Tyron Woodley and winning back the welterweight title wouldn't add to his legacy. It would, but it doesn't make quite the same impact of winning a second title in a different weight class as it would at middleweight. He's already been the 9-time defending welterweight champion. He basically retired as the welterweight champion. I don't think he really has anything left to prove at welterweight. The only reason I think he goes back to welterweight now is if he beats Michael Bisping and has the middleweight title, and then he wants to do what Conor did. He wants to go out there and become a 2-division champion, simultaneous champion, because I think a little bit of that got to GSP a little bit. He was the guy. He was not only was he the spokesperson, so to speak, for the sport. He was the role model for the sport, but he was also the winningest fighter in history, really. And now, Demetrius Johnson has more title defenses. Conor McGregor has done something GSP has never done. I think those are kind of areas where it kind of rubs GSP the wrong way, and he wants to kind of prove he's still the guy. And so I think that plays a part in this. So it's not. I don't think it's anything against Tyron Woodley. I just think he wants to add to a legacy that he hasn't done already. He's been the welterweight champ, and I think the only way he wants to go back to welterweight is if he's already the middleweight champ, and he's trying to add on to that second title so he can do the same thing Conor did, and then maybe if George St. Pierre's body can hold up and he can cut the weight, then maybe he goes down to lightweight to go for that third title and a super fight with Conor McGregor, which would be insane, huge. I mean, this is a lot of stuff down the road, and I know it's a lot of speculation, but I'm just playing in the head of George St. Pierre where I think he's going, and I think that's why this has played out the way it's played out.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that GSP Conor McGregor fight, that's the big fight to make. I mean, some of the crappier fights that have been put together just to sell pay-per-views, that's probably the one that's going to make it. But we'll see what happens. Knowing Robert Whittaker's luck, he'll probably end up defending the interim middleweight belt while GSP is off getting another belt and not defending his middleweight belt if he beats Bisping in this crazy world of MMA. But guys, that is the end of the program. A big thanks to Angelo Reyes, Coach Wink, Stefan Struve, and of course, Damon Martin, who is absolutely killing it out there in the world of MMA. You guys can, of course, follow him on Twitter at Damon Martin. That's the end of the program. Quick reminder, jump on the Submission Radio Facebook. If you're an Australian listener, you can enter a competition to win a Musashi Ultimate Pack with a lot of cool proteins. Jump on that, do that. And until then, we'll catch you guys next week.